And so here's the deal. Come on in. I love it. I love it when shows that we have planned collide with what's happening around us. We have been watching a lot of TV lately, and thankfully you've been watching this show. But over the weekend, Netflix made a big announcement about one of their most popular series. The show is called Sex Education. It's a show that follows the lives of what teenagers are doing and talking about, especially when their parents aren't around. Well, the show will now have a character that doesn't identify as male or female. This character is non-binary. As I said, we happen to have this show planned around the subject, and this news broke just over the weekend about this character. It's so important because a lot of teenagers, a lot of people around the country are revealing to their parents and to their family members that they are non-binary. In fact, before the show started, to be honest with you, I asked some of my team members here, and a couple of them revealed something I didn't know, that members of their own family identify as non-binary. And our audience today, take a look. It's filled with many people who identify as non-binary and their family members. So you might be saying, okay, Tamron, I know there are these TV shows. I know you're talking about it. What does it mean to be non-binary? Well, so often what you see on TV is a mirror image of what's happening at home. And the dynamic being is here with us. NICO joins us. NICO, so much to talk to you about. We featured you in that piece there. Congratulations on The Walking Dead. I want to talk about the spinoff series there. But as I said, I enjoy when something that we've planned to talk about on our show is so relevant that it's in the news. Non-binary, people who identify as non-binary. How do you explain your identity and really how you described it to your family?
Yeah, well, I think it's just that. It's my identity, right? Non-binary identity means something totally different to every single person who may or may not identify as non-binary. And that's okay, right? The work around non-binary identity and gender is more for me about spirituality, and self-determination, right? We were only given these two options. What if there's more?
What if there's more? And it's fascinating with your journey. I know you've spoken about when you first went to Hollywood, there was an agent who told you to cut your long hair, saying that you would get more work because you would look more masculine. It reminded me so much of what Billy Porter, when he was a guest on the show, told me once he started to own his identity, the roles started coming in. Once you released the stigma or the bad advice the agent clearly gave you about who you are, a lot changed for you in Hollywood.
Well, Billy is a dear, dear friend of mine, and the work that he has been able to do in the space is just unprecedented. So shout out, Billy. We love you. I mean, look, I'm an actor first. It's my job to play other people on television and to quite literally transform into other beings. And early on in my career, I realized the more work that I can do internally to understand everyone and everything that existed inside, the more I can bring out, right? More I could come out of sorts.
Right. Well, okay, speaking of that, so again, and I like to have shows where we meet people where they are, meaning not everybody is going to understand exactly what this means. That doesn't mean that they are against understanding. So for clarity here, non-binary has nothing to do with sexuality. It has nothing to do with who you are intimate with. You identify as non-binary. That is not your sexuality.
Absolutely not. The two have nothing to do with each other. Gender, sex, and sexuality, three completely different things, right? I mean, an understanding of gender can influence your ideas around sexuality, but that's like a big old queer spiral that just continues down and down and down.
Well, you know, I want you to stick around because I do want to talk about, to your point, if Hollywood, once you identify yourself as non-binary or once you identify yourself as gay or bisexual, if Hollywood or people can still see you in a role of a so-called straight character. And we're going to talk about The Walking Dead. You guys know how much I love that. We'll be right back. The premiere of The Walking Dead, the franchise, the new spinoff this Sunday. We'll talk much more about NICO, his groundbreaking role, and his enlightening conversation on something that's in the news today. We'll be right back. Neighbors, your friends, maybe your own children. Actor NICO Tortorella joins us back. NICO, I'm curious about this because we were talking about how people will typecast you once you reveal more about yourself. And now you played the heartthrob Josh on TV Land's Younger, a very masculine character, a role you got in 2015. Well, some people would say hunky masculine. I don't know what that means, but that's what the team told me this character identifies as. Do you think you would have gotten that role? I guess I'm asking you, being non-binary now and announcing that, how does that impact when there's a script for a so-called hunky heartthrob? Do you still hear agents and directors worry, well, you know, they know so much about his personal life, they won't believe him in this role? Or them. See, I made my first mistake there. It's them.
It's all good. We are all working on it. It is not.
Okay, I'm going to dump the script here because I just got nervous because I said him and I should have said them. And you know that a lot of people will make that mistake. How do we, how do we make an awkward moment okay? Yeah,
I mean, I think language continues to fail us all the time. It gets in the way of how we're actually feeling. And unfortunately, within the community and on the outside of the community, we get so hung up on words and identifiers that we forget how we feel. This conversation, non-binary identity, has to do with how we feel. It has nothing to do with how we look or what it means to be out in the world, right? This is a conversation about how we feel. And unfortunately, that's a hard conversation to have right now because we are still so focused on how we all look. I mean, we all can't even agree just like at a basic level that everyone, no matter their skin color, should have basic equal rights and opportunity. How can we begin to have a conversation about how we feel if we can't get past how we look?
Yeah, and I thought about today how many times I randomly have to identify my gender in applications that gender have nothing to do with, like going in a credit card application, asks you your gender. What does that have to do with anything? But it's on there, other than some allegations of discrimination against women when we do apply, and I'll do that on another show.
Yes,
but
that's it, though.
You know,
but that's
it is true. It's a trick bag in so many ways. But I do want to talk to you because I know you've got to go. But The Walking Dead, I'm a fan, excited since day one. This weekend's premiere of the new spinoff series, The Walking Dead World Beyond. You play Felix, a gay character who joins the group. How much pressure is it to keep this franchise going? Because it has been moving along, and now you've got these spinoffs. How does that feel to really have the weight of the franchise on your shoulders, friend?
Well, I think 10 years later, the show is even more important. We have more zombies and walkers on television, on the news, than we do in the Walking Dead series, right? We're talking mirrors today, Tamron, right? So, look, I have wanted to play a queer superhero for such a long time, and I finally get that opportunity with Felix. This is a story maybe not about superheroes, but every human being is a superhero to some capacity, and I get to bring Felix to life.
Well, congratulations on the spinoff, on Felix bringing together this character. And thank you again for your understanding in my own mix-up of saying he versus them there. And we're going to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much, Nico, for your time.
Thanks
and by the way, you can catch Nico in AMC's The Walking Dead World Beyond, premiering October 4th. And coming up, here we go. Ridicule, shame, even suicidal thoughts, the price some non-binary people pay to live their truth. We're going to spend the day in their shoes, what they face, and the acceptance many are now receiving. As I said, our virtual audience filled with people who identify as non-binary, some of their pain. Have a good conversation around here. We say, let's talk about it. So how would you react if tomorrow your son or daughter sat you down and said, don't call me her anymore. Don't call me him. I'm they. We're about to introduce you to 3 people who reintroduced themselves to family, friends, and coworkers in that very way. The reaction, as you can imagine, was varied, but it was a decision they all say they had no choice but to make.
I just got out of the store where I was buying a comforter, and when I was checking out, the cashier referred to me as sir, and it wasn't worth correcting her.
I want to be, acknowledged and recognized as a non-binary person.
This is my chest binder. When I wear a shirt over this, I don't have any breasts that are noticeable.
Dysphoria affects every trans person differently.
Week 1,
3 months on T, 7 months on T.
Now that I'm on testosterone, my voice is a little deeper, so that makes a difference.
I felt like there was something wrong with me. The best way I can describe it to like a cis person would be dressing up in drag because you were like almost forced to. I feel like an outsider in my own body. My family used to take me to church, and if I had to wear a dress to church, I would go and hide in the bathroom and cry. I became very, very just like chronically depressed.
I had to use the women's bathroom, and it felt like that was one of the big factors holding me back. I could tell people all I wanted that I was not a woman, right? But if I run into them in the woman's bathroom, of course they're just gonna like make an assumption.
There was one gender-neutral bathroom on campus, and I had to walk all the way across campus just to use the bathroom. It felt like almost like a walk of shame.
You realize how few systems are actually built with people outside of the gender binary in mind. There's a lot of programs where it's like select your gender and it's male or female, and there's no other options. Sometimes that other option is just the word other. It really makes you feel like you're not included, that you're off to the side, and that doesn't feel good.
So joining us now are Eli Casavant, Kay Schwenk, and Nikita Luchuk. Welcome and thank you for sharing your video diaries with us. Kay, let me start with you. Is it that you are non-binary or you identify as non-binary? As Nico pointed out first, this language matters here. So help us understand how we say this.
Yeah, of course. They're both correct. Neither one is the wrong thing to say. I would recommend, in general, saying someone is non-binary if you have the option to choose between one of those, just because it feels a little bit more natural to me. Like, if you find someone who's a cisgender woman, a woman assigned female at birth and still identifies as a woman, you wouldn't say she identifies as a woman.
Right.
You would typically say she is a woman.
That would be me. I am a cisgender. I was born female. I identify as female. And so I would not, well, okay, yeah. I'd say I am. I am cisgender. So that's the same way in non-binary as you see it?
That's how I see it, yeah.
Because, Eli, let me bring you in because, again, so much of who we are, sometimes we clump everybody as the same. We know that even in the non-binary world, if you call it that, people have different journeys. You have different ways of processing it. You were 15 when you came out as non-binary. At the time, you felt you were suicidal because it felt like, as I understand it, torture, not being able to identify with the sex you've been assigned at birth. Explain to me what day-to-day life feels like when you're in that situation. Because I thought a lot of all three of you over the weekend, and I just tracked how many times gender comes up in our day-to-day life. For example, when you go get your driver's license, what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm actually about to get my driver's license, and I have to remember that I have to give both my legal name and my legal sex, or what they clump together as gender, and that can be very uncomfortable, and it almost feels like I have to remind myself that that's a part of me that it's still there. It's just a constant reminder that I'm different and that I don't fit in with other people.
So how do you prepare yourself for that? I mean, you're going in to get the driver's license, you know that. And you also know that as you continue on your journey, you're so young, this will come up and does all day long. When you get your passport, when you go in and open a bank account, some banks would ask you your gender. How do you prepare to constantly be reminded of something that you'd like to put behind you?
Well, in most cases, I just suck it up because I know it's something that not a lot of people are going to be understanding about, which is unfortunate. But it's just the reality, it shouldn't be like that, but it is.
I watched all of you nod, Nikita, you too, when it was just said, you just learned to suck it up. And one of the things that you have in common with Eli is that you were both young when you made this declaration about yourself. You were in 8th grade. One of the things that we know is that there are people who even now will say, and I've been doing TV for a long time, folks, when we start talking about how you identify yourself, will say, you're too young, you don't understand who you are. What do you say now? We set it up with so many characters out there. We know that by the numbers, it's unclear how many people identify as non-binary because it's honestly not tracked, but it's talked about everywhere. So you're in the 8th grade. How do you tell someone, I know what I am. I know what I identify as?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I was fortunate in the 8th grade. I was homeschooled, and that was the only year I was homeschooled, and it was very serendipitous because I didn't have to deal with all of my peers as I was figuring it out. So by the time I entered 9th grade, I'd had quite a while to think about it and figure out how I wanted to present myself. And the other thing is, when you're non-binary, you have to a certain extent, you feel a little bit gross all of the time.
What? What does that mean? How?
People always misgender you. There's not really a sort of way for you to move through life because it's so new. People just don't understand. And so since people don't understand, even if they have the best of intentions, you know, they're going to end up, you know, while they're learning, still making mistakes. And it just feels a little bit gross. You know, when I go to the doctor's office to pick up my testosterone, I have to give them my birth name, right? And it's just kind of, no matter what you do or where you go, you know, it's always going to come back to you. There's sort of nothing you can do about it.
I want you to stand by because Kay's mother, Karen, is going to join us. What is a parent's reaction to this? Also, something else I learned this weekend. Do you know what dead naming is? We're going to talk about it and why that can put you in a very difficult conversation. You heard our young people say how it can make them feel gross, these awkward situations. Well, we're going to educate ourselves on dead naming and why it can be problematic as these young people tell their truth. And hopefully we try to understand and listen. We'll be right back. Hey, Tam fan, we may not be in the same room, but we can share the same mug. The Tamron Hall Show mugs, T-shirts, hats, and of course the crop top, all available on TamronHallShow.com. Drink up. Eli, Kay, and Nikita, 3 young people who identify as non-binary. Thank you for staying here. So, Kay, let's talk about this. I'll tell you a quick story, because I got a story for everything. I was hosting an event, LGBTQ plus event, and I, in the middle of my speech, said, you know, we're all brothers and sisters. And I looked out at the audience, and I thought, oh, what have I just done? My heart started racing. They didn't make enough deodorant to keep me from sweating. I was like, what have I done? And I just ran off practically after my speech. This happens with this dead naming. How do we go about this? Or it's just off limits, asking anything about who the birth, your birth. Explain this to me.
Yeah, so it's just, for a lot of people, it's something they don't want to relive. It can be kind of painful to think back on who you were before you came out. And it differs a lot on how much that matters to each person.
Yeah. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. So, Eli, what's your feeling on dead naming?
It can be very, very traumatic for me. You know, it's just something that makes me feel like I'm almost withering on the inside every time. It's just something that I try and avoid at all costs. And it's gotten to the point where I don't even feel like I identify with my dead name. And what I mean by that is, you know, if I hear that at the doctor's office or something, sometimes I won't respond because it's just I've distanced myself so far from it.
Nikita, what's your feeling on dead naming?
Well, misgendering sort of happens, you know, all the time. It's just peppered into your daily life. For me, dead naming in itself means like the use of the actual birth name.
Gotcha.
And for me and a lot of other trans people, what'll happen is when we introduce ourselves as trans, people will say things like, ooh, what was your other name? And it's
it's kind of weird to me because you don't need to know that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not important.
Some things are none of your business. That's what you can just say. Some things are none of your business. Well, Kay, I know Karen, your mother, is here, and Karen, it was part of our virtual audience, which I said is filled with people who some identify as non-binary and their family members. So Karen, what was it like for you learning the pronouns and learning to understand what Kay had revealed to you?
At first it was really difficult. I didn't see it coming at all, so I was just completely shocked at first. It took me a long time to process it. I knew that I would need help with this, so I instantly sought out a professional therapist who was able to really educate me and help me. But I've always just loved my children so much, and I just want my child to live the most authentic life that they can. And if this is how my child identifies.
When I asked you about it, I watched Kay take a deep breath, and then when you said, I've always loved my children, I watched the release, because you know that, Kay, but hearing your mom, Karen, address that. Karen, what is your feeling on dead naming, old photos, you know, having to know that your child's to fill out gender assigned at birth and still have to deal with that every day? Even, I'm sure, when you look back at baby pictures, I mean, which all parents do. I look back, my son's 17 months, I look back at his birth pictures. How does that feel when you look back at those photos?
I think things are a little different in our case because Kay said that the birth name isn't a dead name.
Yeah.
So we looked through these photos together on video chat to see which ones to send you.
Yeah.
And Kay has said that that wasn't an unhappy time in their life. So I feel like it's a little different for us. So it's just taking time to get used to the new name and the new pronouns and educating other people. It takes time. It's a habit to practice using the new name and pronouns, and it's definitely doable. It just takes some time to get used to, and I have to spend a lot of my time educating other people on the use of they and them.
Well, and that's what we're doing today, and I appreciate you both joining us, all of you, Eli, Nikita, Kay, Karen. With each conversation, I do believe comes growth and understanding, and that's why it was important for me and my team to do this show today. You know, like I said, we didn't know it was going to be in the headlines when we planned the show, but it makes it all the more relevant. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I hope we will continue to talk and educate people. Thank you. And coming up, we're going to meet a mom who's raising her toddler gender-free since birth. But now her child is starting to express their gender identity, despite how hard the parent worked to live this gender-free conversation we're having today starts, of course, when a baby is still in the womb. Ultrasounds reveal age, the doctor says to you, boy or girl. And even if the parents don't want to know the sex, there is always the question from family and friends and strangers, what do you have it? Our next guest not only refused to answer that question 4 years ago when she was pregnant with her child, she still would not identify the child. Now, a toddler, Zoomer, is the child's name, and she refers to her child as a baby. And Kyle Myers and her husband, Brent, are raising Zoomer as part of the gender creative parenting movement. She wrote a book about it. It's called Raising Them.
Yay, Zoomer! Our life looks remarkably like other families' lives, but we are really intentional about teaching Zoomer a really inclusive vocabulary and a really inclusive perspective. We're not like, those are boy things and girl things. Like, that just never comes out of our mouth. When we go shopping for clothes, they walk through all of the department. They're just like walking around and like, I want that dinosaur shirt from this section, and I want those like rainbow shorts from this section. They'll use like they, them pronouns for people who they don't know yet, you know, what their pronouns are. They say like friend or kid instead of boy or girl. I don't want to come across like our life is like rainbows and unicorns. We've been like building up a thick skin over the years. Like we went to like a little gymnastics place, and like there was a parent there who like hated what we were doing. It was just like, you're abusing your child, this is sick. your kids should be taken away. It was like, you don't even know us.
I love you, Zoomer.
Love you too, peanut butter.
Kyle joins us from her home in Salt Lake City, Utah. Kyle, you don't identify Zoomer as a baby. Some people use that phrase. I'm curious, why did you and Brent decide to raise your child this way?
Yeah. Well, we wanted to do gender creative parenting for two main reasons. The first is that I know a lot of people who are intersex or transgender or non-binary whose parents didn't get their gender assignment right when they were born. So we didn't want to make any assumptions about what our child's gender would be. We just wanted to let them learn about gender and play with gender. And wait until they could tell us what their gender identity and pronouns were whenever they were ready.
So Zoomer is 4 now, and so take me through again. I like to always try to walk in someone's shoes. You're at the park and someone says, he is so cute. What do you say?
Thanks.
That's genius. I mean, do you correct when are there circumstances that you correct someone when they identify Zoomer as a gender?
Totally. So I think we just, have to kind of measure our capacity to have conversations, right? So like in the grocery store, I'm not gonna like stop somebody who's just trying to pay us a nice compliment and be like, are you ready for your gender, lecture? But if someone is going to be in Zoomer's life, if someone, is a teacher or a healthcare provider and is going to have numerous interactions with them, that's where we would be like, here's what we're trying to do. We want to give them space and we want to not stereotype them.
Let me ask you though, because as I said, you've been very deliberate about this. But what we know is around the ages between 3 and 5, children start to identify as a gender, and that could be through society, colors, and this is what they hear. Zoomer is now expressing a gender, which we're not revealing, but that's the reality that's happening in your home now, which is typical for a child that age.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I think our gender identities are influenced by a lot of things, right? Our families and cultures and our peers and the media that we watch and the magic uniqueness that makes us us. And so Zoomer did start claiming some, gendered labels and pronouns, and that is a lot of nature and nurture, and the way we parent has influenced that, but also what shows they watch, right? And their teachers and their peers at school. And Zoomer's gender identity may have been different if we had assigned a binary gender to them, and it may have been different if we lived in the woods off the grid with no, TV. So we're just accepting Zoomer and honoring and supporting their gender identity and recognizing that it may stay the same through their whole life, or it might be fluid and change.
I want you to stand by because I'm intrigued by this part where you have for 4 years tried to shepherd this child along in a non-binary way. Do you feel that it's failed when the child identifies as a gender? You're going to answer that after the break. We'll be right back. 4-year-old child, Zoomer, gender-free. Kyle, I've got to tell you, I was thinking about how many times, especially with a young child, you're asked the child's gender. I'm enrolling my son soon in preschool. My mother even just texted me, who's watching the show live, and she said a friend of hers said, I still don't understand. This is about not assigning male, female. This has nothing to do with sexuality. This has nothing to do with any of those topics. It's just gender. But in a 4-year-old's journey, just enrolling in school, you're asked this multiple times. For parents who are curious here, how do you navigate? Is that the hardest part?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest parts, and it's not necessarily difficult, but it's frustrating how often I'm asked as a parent if I have a boy or a girl, as if those are the only options.
And you say to that question, hi, Kyle, you have a boy or a girl?
Well, before Zoomer was identifying with a gender, we'd just say, we don't know yet. They haven't told us their gender. And, we don't know if they're a boy or a girl or non-binary. We're just waiting to hear from Zoomer. And I think that so many people, though, stereotypes, binary gender stereotypes are so entrenched. And so many people think that if you tell them, I have a boy or I have a girl, they feel like they now have so much information about this child when they don't.
And they start making stereotypes. So if you're standing there with Zoomer and you said, I don't know, I'm waiting for Zoomer to tell me, some people would say, well, Zoomer is right there, and you've got a birth certificate. And I think not always, I don't think people are asking this question clearly, you know this better than I, to be mean. They are confused or don't understand. Go ahead.
They're conflating sex and gender. So what they're actually trying to tell me is, will you tell me what genitals your child has? Because I want to then put a gendered script on top of that, right? Like I feel like I will know how to treat your child if you tell me they have a penis or a vulva. When sex, right, like doesn't have the thing to do with gender as much as like our society likes to think it does. So I don't want to tell you, you know, what genitals my child has because A, it's none of your business.
That's a powerful way to put it. Okay, you just knocked me back in my seat on that because I didn't think of it in those terms. So now you've tried your best as a parent to navigate this gender-free, and now Zoomer is identifying as a gender. Does it feel that I don't like using the word failed, but that it didn't work?
No, I can see how gender creative parenting has worked so much with Zoomer, of how inclusive they are with people and how compassionate and how they talk in a really gender diverse language, right? They know about non-binary people and they them pronouns. And so the point of gender creative parenting isn't to make your kid non-binary. It is to provide a soft landing for them to be whoever they're going to be.
You look great. You know what? This is a great conversation. I always say this. The show is an hour long. You can go on for days. We want to keep this one going. Go to our social media. Let us know what you think. TamronHallShow.com. Thank you, Kyle, for your story. Give my love to Zoomer. Up next, fresh off her appearance at the Emmys, Alana Glazer got people wondering, is there a Broad City comeback? She's going to join us to talk about that and an important new project she wants to share with us. We'll be right back. 14 as the star and co-creator of the critically acclaimed series Broad City. But now Alana Glazer doesn't just want us to laugh. This November, she wants young people especially to vote. And Alana joins us now from her upstate home in New York upstate. So good to see you. So I love it. You're now taking on my job. You're now the interviewer behind camera, interviewing some huge stars, Zoe Kravitz, Wanda Sykes, Busy Phillips, for this new web series. It's called Cheat Sheet for the Voting Booth. I want to show our audience a clip.
Don't you think voting is like the hottest thing someone can do in this extremely unsexy year?
I genuinely think it is. You said that democracy is the ability or the opportunity to choose your opponent. And that really got me. Because it's true. We can't be little brats that are mad that we don't have a better choice. We're lucky that we get to choose who to fight.
Well, you're looking for the secret sauce, how to get young voters to not just talk about it, but vote. How has this been for you?
So, man, I give you props for this job because it is hard. It's hard to interview people. And also, like, as they're talking to you, to come up with the right angle for the next, you know what I mean? That connection. But for me, like, it's also been kind of, it's kind of flowed, this experience, because I'm feeling it just like in my bones, the urgency for the election this year. This is just such a phenomenally important moment in our country's history. So it's also just like flowing from me. And go ahead.
But you're doing something, again, I was in cable news for 10 years. Every time, like, young people are going to turn out, and then there was always a disappointing number.
Yes. I don't know, man. I feel, sorry, I keep calling you man, like we're like,
it's all good. I've been called worse.
Yeah. And that's also like really Biden-y, you know how he's like, come on, man. It's not like a Biden thing. But I have hope for Gen Z and millennials. I really do. The younger generation gets a bad rap for being lazy or being entitled. But what I see with Gen Z and millennials is that we are self-starters, that we communicate with each other. You know, we have the tools to communicate as effectively as possible compared to generations in the past. And this year, Gen Z and millennials make up 37% of the possible voting population. This is the biggest voting block of young people in our nation's history for an election. I'm really inspired and believe that young people and young women of color can show up and claim this election.
Wow. Well, you know, it's a powerful way to reach, especially some of the interviews that you've done with people that have compelling stories. I saw Zoe talk about the first time she voted. So listen, I've got to ask you, though, before we let you go. Abby Jacobson, your former co-star, you guys reunited at the Emmys. Everyone was tweeting, Broad City, are you going to return? What's going on here? Is there a reboot or is this a pipe dream for everybody?
You know, we took a walk the other day and we were like, maybe we should start a spreadsheet. We really,
yay!
you know, yeah, it's like we definitely got to like take a beat for a second and be our own people for a while and be actually just real friends who aren't creating a show, you know, in a fake universe all the time. But we dream of it too.
So, okay, so Tamron Hall Show exclusive. You are scale of 1 to 10 thinking what about Broad City? This is live.
You know, it would be.
Okay.
I'm 33. Like it couldn't be for like 10 years, but scale of 1 to 10, I don't know. I mean, in the realm of possibility, it's on the higher end. It's on the majority side, but
well, you're very busy right now, but I like hearing that it's on the realm of possibility. I got an answer, folks, so you can stop asking me on Twitter. Something live. Well, you know, congratulations on all this. Before I let you go real quick, dream guest. People always ask me, is there a dream person you'd like to interview?
You know, I guess we're unofficial, so we can't coordinate with the campaign, but I would love to interview Kamala Harris. I just think it would just make so much sense for young voters right now to be able to interview her right now. I think it would just click in that 37%. I think it would really help.
Well, we've had the pleasure of having her on the show, and we welcome all the candidates as we are narrowing down and getting closer here. Well, congratulations again on all the success around the board, from the world of acting to trying to empower people to use their voice effectively. So good to see you, and when that reboot happens or anything else, just come on by. We'll talk.